Did Kyle Larson tease a new championship format? Ty Gibbs now has a crew chief in the Cup Series. Plus, Sergio Perez out at Red Bull, Esteban Ocon out at Alpine. Some silly season in Formula One. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. Yes, the hair is crazy today. Had to wear a beanie when I went out to walk the dog this morning. Didn't do anything with it all day when I was working. So we're just going to deal with it and we'll have a fix for tomorrow. But let's get into what we want to talk about today. Kyle Larson was at Race Industry Week talking on the panel on Monday morning. And he mentioned that he's excited to get started in 2025, hoping to go get more wins, lead more laps. And he's interested to see if the new format fits his team well. What new format? Who's getting a new format? NASCAR's getting a new format? This is kind of news to everybody because after Phoenix, one of the things that we heard from sports business journals and others is that NASCAR likely wouldn't make any wholesale changes going into the 2025 season because it's a pretty tight time frame, right? Like if they're going to make this decision right after the Phoenix race and then, before the Clash gets started in February, you're talking about 2 months, 2.5 months to try to get this done. And that's a pretty tight time frame, especially if you want to run it past like all the stakeholders, which would be the teams in this situation, your TV partners and stuff like that. So a new format for next year would be highly, highly interesting and unlikely, but also intriguing to say the least. Now, NASCAR has announced new formats pretty late in the offseason before. They announced the elimination style format back in 2014. They announced that on January 21st, 2014. The stage racing and the seeding that they announced in 2017, that happened on January 23rd. So they definitely have some time to get this announcement out, and like doing it a week before the Clash isn't out of the question. So it's not like we haven't had this happen before, but again, it would be pretty interesting if it did happen in this short of a time frame. And one thing I don't want to see NASCAR do is a knee-jerk reaction and make some changes just for the sake of making changes. No, I think if we're going to make changes, we need to sit back, look at it and be like, this is the correct change to make, not just something where we're like, we're tired of Matt Kenseth, the Matt Kenseth of the world going out and only winning one race and winning the championship. Let's overhaul the whole system. Hang on a second. Pump the brakes here. Let's make sure that it makes sense before you go ahead and do it. And like I've said before, I have a lot of faith in the NASCAR leadership, the current NASCAR leadership regime. I think Jim France is actually good for the sport. I don't think he's bad. I think Steve Phelps, Steve O'Donnell had the best interests of NASCAR at heart. And I don't think they're going to make a knee-jerk reaction in terms of like, let's overhaul the whole system, this offseason. I think they'll sit back and look at it if they are going to make any sort of changes. But to hear Kyle Larson say that was pretty interesting. The quote was, quote, "I'm excited about next year and hopefully we can continue to evolve, get stronger as a team, win some races, lead some laps. And who knows what the new format will be. So maybe it will benefit us somehow." Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I think a lot of people want to see the dominant car of the year make it to the championship race. And I don't disagree with that, but like the way that the format is set up now doesn't guarantee that at all, and you have to perform in the playoffs. I think, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, a lot of people kind of get hung up on the fact that this used to be a 36 race championship, not a 1 race championship, essentially is what it comes down to, or, 3 rounds of 3 race, small championships. So to be able to look at it and be like, they don't like the format. They don't like that you can get knocked out because of it. They think that you should be able to make it all the way to the end. Now, keep in mind, Jeff Gordon, 1996, won 10 races, did not win the title. So we've seen things like this happen before. It just seems like now the uproar was incredibly loud just because it was Joey Logano and how bad he was in the regular season and the fact that he got in because Alex Bowman's team broke a rule, which wasn't Logano's fault. So yeah, like I said, I don't want to see a knee-jerk reaction, but if there is a new format coming, yeah, I would love to know what it is. Ty Gibbs has a new crew chief for the 2025 season. Obviously, his crew chief, Chris Gale, went over to the 11 car of Denny Hamlin for next season after Chris Gabehart will lead the top of the pit box and now oversee all the Joe Gibbs Racing Cup Series teams as the competition director over at Joe Gibbs Racing. Chris Gale, obviously, like I said, goes to the 11. He was with the 54 of Ty Gibbs this season. Ty Gibbs now gets Tyler Allen, the Tyler and Tyler show over at the 54 car. Tyler Allen had 1 season as a crew chief in the Xfinity Series this year, actually, in 2024. He went to victory lane 8 times with 4 different drivers. Not too shabby. I mean, he got Eric Almirola multiple wins, John Hunter Nemechek, Ryan Truex. Yeah, the guy's pretty good at what he does, actually. Didn't get Ty Gibbs to victory lane, though. That is worth noting, although Ty only raced 1 time in the Xfinity Series this year. But for Tyler Allen, is a big time step for him. He has served as an engineer for multiple Joe Gibbs Racing Cup Series teams, I believe Christopher Bell as well as Kyle Busch. So for him to get this opportunity is a really big step in his career for him. him. And obviously, he's a race-winning crew chief in the Xfinity Series. Now, we know how strong that Joe Gibbs Racing Xfinity program has been in the past. It's pretty simple, right? There have been jokes that people are like, you could put a monkey in the car and go out there and win that race. I could hop in that car and go win that race. Jocko Flacco, I believe that was the monkey's name, that could go in there and win the race. So, yeah, I think that it's a big time step. It's a bit of a gamble, right? But he's young. Joe Gibbs Racing has a lot of faith in him. And maybe that's what Ty Gibbs needs to get him over that hump in the Cup Series. We've seen Ty Gibbs lead laps. We've seen him contend for races. But then in that final quarter of the race, he seems to fall apart at times and just can never close out a race. He's a guy that probably should have 2-3 wins already in his career, but ultimately just hasn't been able to get to that point because, I don't know, something just always seems to go wrong in the closing stages of this race, or he's harder than Robbie Gordon on equipment at times because that dude just broke so much equipment in the second half of 2024. It was laughable. It's like, what are you getting? Parts made out of porcelain over here? I don't understand because it just seems like every single race he had something break. So maybe 2025 with Tyler Allen will be the change that he needs. But now the Joe Gibbs Racing crew chief lineup is set. We'll see what they can do in 2025. Obviously, like we talked about, they haven't won a race in the Cup Series since the end of June at New Hampshire. They went 18 races without winning one to close out the season. Which when you're Joe Gibbs Racing, you're the flagship Toyota team, you're the factory Toyota team, that's not acceptable. You want to absolutely change that and hopefully come out of the gate at Daytona in those first few races in 2025 and, make sure that you're showing everybody that you've righted the wrongs this offseason. And for the 11 and the 54 team, they are going to have big chips on their shoulders because they're going to have something to prove. Denny Hamlin needs to prove that he can do this without Chris Gabehart. Ty Gibbs needs to prove that, well, he can do this. And not do this meaning win a race. I mean, I think we all know that he can drive. There's no question about that. So we'll see what happens with them. But Tyler Allen, new crew chief of the 54 car for Ty Gibbs in the Cup Series. And now into some Formula One silly season. On Monday morning, ESPN reported that Sergio Perez will not return to Red Bull Racing in 2025, concluding a 4-year run with the team, which resulted in 5 victories. But ultimately, he's become a massive liability for Red Bull Racing in 2024. He hasn't finished in the top 5 since Miami. That was back in May. That's a long time ago to not be good when your teammates out winning races. Oh, and a world championship. He's become a massive liability this year, like I've said, because Red Bull is going to finish 3rd in the constructors title. Even though Max won the drivers championship, Sergio just hasn't been there to get points at all. In 7 races so far this year, he has not scored any points, and that is absolutely unacceptable when you have a car as good as Red Bull puts out there every single week. Sergio can come on, into his press conferences and say that he's going to return next year, that he has a contract and this and that. Let's be honest, I hope by now everybody knows that contracts in motorsports really don't mean anything, and they can always be bought out, they can always be torn up, and then you can always get out of them if you want to. And that's something that I think Sergio is going to understand. Christian Horner was quoted after the race in Qatar on Sunday saying that Sergio is old enough. He understands what this is and the decisions that need to be made. So basically, he's like giving Sergio the opportunity to retire if he wants to take on a ambassador role with Red Bull Racing, which was offered to Daniel Ricciardo when he was dropped by VCARB earlier in the year. Ultimately, he decided not to take that, which makes sense. He's probably a little bit bitter about it. And I don't think Sergio is going to take this either. I did see some people mention that he would be a great candidate for Cadillac in 2026. No, sorry, just no. He's been around too long. He's too old. He's a guy that has shown this year that he does not have the pace in a really good race car. Granted, is it the dominant car that he had last year when he finished 2nd in the championship? No, absolutely not. But it's still a car that he should have been able to, finish in the top 5 with at some point since Miami back in May. So he is likely out. His replacement over at Red Bull Racing, according to this story from ESPN, is likely to be Liam Lawson, who obviously fills in now at VCARB after Daniel Ricciardo got dropped. Red Bull's been high on Liam Lawson for quite some time. There's some talk out there that he is required to have a Formula One seat in 2025, whether that be at VCARB or at Red Bull Racing. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we know teammates to Max Verstappen typically do not fare well at all. We'll see how Liam Lawson does. Yuki Tsunoda, his name was also mentioned as a possibility for that 2nd Red Bull seat. Seems somewhat unlikely considering that Honda is going to depart the team and Ford will come in. But Yuki has shown pace at multiple times this year. who will replace either Liam or Yuki over at VCarb in 2025. That would likely be Isaac Hadjar. So he is currently sitting second in the F2 championship. He has had an outing this year already in FP1 with Red Bull Racing. They view him highly. He's been part of the Red Bull Driver Academy for some time now, and likely will be a formidable driver, especially for VCarb in 2025 if that's the decision that they decide to make. But Sergio being booted from one of the best seats in Formula One is certainly going to grab headlines after Abu Dhabi this upcoming weekend, assuming that it gets confirmed pretty quickly. On the other side of things, we have Alpine, who ousted Esteban Ocon with one race to go in the 2024 season. He will not race for the Enstone team at Abu Dhabi this weekend. Instead, Jack Doohan, who was set to take his place in 2025, will instead make his Formula One race debut this weekend, a race earlier than expected. We didn't expect him until the start of 2025. Now we get him at the end of 2024. Ocon is off to Haas. His release allows him to go do the season-ending test with Haas after the race this weekend, or this upcoming Sunday. So kind of works out for him. Unfortunately, he just doesn't get to start the race in Abu Dhabi. He and the Alpine team have not seen eye to eye for quite some time. There's some talk of dropping him earlier in the season after he and teammate Pierre Gasly clashed. I'm sure Ocon probably felt, a little bit outed because it was his team and then Pierre came in and now it's become Pierre's team. They're both French drivers. You would expect the team to probably treat you both, the same. Just didn't seem like that was going to happen. Pierre Gasly has quickly asserted himself as the guy in that team. And now Jack Doohan will come in and take over that ride this weekend and into next. In his 4 seasons with the team, Esteban Ocon, 5 seasons with the team, one of those under the Renault banner, the others underneath the Alpine banner. He recorded 4 podiums, a win at Hungary in 2021. Shocking win. He got a shocking podium just a couple weeks ago in Sao Paulo with a second place finish in Brazil. So still has it at times. That team is always very hit or miss. It's very odd. But for Doohan, he gets into the car. He is the third place finisher in the F2 championship in 2023. He is not racing in 2024. He, of course, did have an FP1 outing. They view him highly over there. And hey, we're getting an Australian back on the grid as well. So all the Aussies will have somebody to cheer for when we get down to the Australian Grand Prix next year. But F1 silly season kind of felt like it might have been over a little bit. And now it's really sparked itself back up with a seat swap or a driver being released and the new driver coming in a race early. Don't typically see that happen, very often. We, of course, will see drivers get dropped mid-season before, but the one race at the end of the year is always an interesting one. So let me know in the comments what you think about NASCAR possibly introducing a new playoff format, thanks to Kyle Larson, his comment. Ty Gibbs getting a new crew chief, as well as F1 silly season. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.